Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk about the new movie, The Boogeyman. The Boogeyman is directed by Rob Savage and is based on a short story by Stephen King. I'm a big fan of creature horror movies, so I decided to check this one out. The synopsis is as follows. High school student Sadie Harper and her younger sister Sawyer are still reeling from the recent death of their mother. They're not getting much support from their father, Will, a therapist who's dealing with his own intense pain. When a desperate patient unexpectedly shows up at their house seeking help, he leaves behind a terrifying supernatural entity that preys on families and feeds on the suffering of its victims. So without further ado, let's get into the 6 things that make a movie great. 1. The plot. The plot of this movie follows Sadie as she's trying to return to the life that she had just after her mother died, and having to take care of both herself and her little sister when it comes to these things. And it's pretty obvious that while Will is good at helping others deal with their pain or the issues they're having in their life, he clearly hasn't healed through his own wounds. Right after he finishes wrapping up a session with one client, a strange man walks into his home and asks desperately if he can have a session with him. After the man's departure, things start getting pretty scary around their household, and things that seem to be a product of trauma or fear start becoming much more tangible and threatening. I really enjoy the way that this story was told, because you get a really good mixture of a creature horror movie mixed with the obvious undertone of fear, pain, and trauma and what it can do to people's lives. But not if you have cats around, because they save you from everything. But when it comes to the pain and trauma, a lot of horror movies have issues not having it be too right on the nose. This movie did a really good job mixing creature horror with that subtone to the point where they were almost one and the same. And there were multiple times throughout the film where I found myself asking, is this real or not? Like I've mentioned before many times, I think the element of mystery can add a really good subtone into almost any movie that you put it into. And this movie did just that. Sadie has to play detective a little bit when it comes to what is real and what's not, and I thought it was a very nice element in this movie. So the plot was told really effectively, it had a lot of nice dynamics in it, and you get to the end of the movie, and while there's an unsettling moment there, in my opinion it concluded really well. So for me, plot gets a thumbs up. 2 is family friendliness. The Boogeyman is rated PG-13, and I thought they did a really good job of staying within that frame. There's some mild profanity, including 1 F-bomb. There is some blood, multiple deaths, and a handful of really terrifying moments. And like I mentioned, a lot of the undertone of this movie has to do with dealing with pain and grief while also dealing with a terrifying creature. They don't go overboard on a ton, but this movie is scary and has a lot of dark and violent things going on in it, so in my opinion it's not family friendly. So family friendliness gets a thumbs down. 3 is acting and script. I thought all the acting performances in this movie were great, but the clear standout here is Sophie Thatcher as Sadie Harper. She did such a good job of bringing this character to life, and her acting performance was very convincing. I also have to mention Vivian Blair. She did an excellent job playing Sawyer, and it was honestly one of the better child acting performances that I've seen in a long time. And when you have convincing acting performances that make sense with what's going on, it just makes the movie that much more immersive, and to me, that much more frightening. Those ladies carried this movie and did an excellent job, and the surrounding cast did a good job as well. And I really enjoyed the script of this movie. There were a couple cringy moments here and there having to do with Sadie's friends at school, so much so that they challenged my willing suspense of disbelief just a little bit. But all the other moments of dialogue between characters and things that happened in this film I thought made sense and did really good job. So because of that, acting and script get a thumbs up. 4 is character development. Looking back on this movie, I realized that probably the only character that has much development is Sadie, but they do an extremely good job. While this movie is not seen specifically through her eyes, she is the main character, and between the grief that she feels for her mom, the protective nature she feels for her younger sister, and the love that she has for her dad even though he's emotionally distant, they do a really good job making it all come together to develop her character well, and she's super easy to identify with. But I really enjoyed her arc in this film. It's very well done. You get some development with Sawyer and Will, but they're mainly used as tools to develop Sadie's character and to bring along the plot of this movie. But this movie knew what it wanted to do, and it didn't have to develop all of its characters a ton in order to make that happen. They developed Sadie Harper extremely well, and that made this movie great. So for me, character development gets a thumbs up. 5 is visuals and CGI. Now, I'm not a big fan of jump scares in horror movies. I typically prefer movies that are naturally creepy and scary and don't just throw something up on the screen to make you scared. That being said, I think there may have been 1 or 2 in this movie, but this movie was very naturally scary. It had very effective use of lights and sounds, and some perspective shots that made things extremely creepy. I was a big fan of the way this movie presented itself, and I think they did a very effective job. So for me, visuals and CGI, I get a thumbs up. And 6 is rewatchability. The Boogeyman is an hour and 38 minutes long, but because of how effectively they used their time in this film, it seemed longer than that, but not in a bad way. There's always a risk when making a movie from a short story, but this movie did an excellent job telling the story of a short story and having it all be cohesive and make sense. They used every moment of this movie that they could and didn't waste any time. From beginning to end, through and through, it was just a really well told story. So for me, rewatchability gets a thumbs up. With all these areas considered, I have to give The Boogeyman an 8.5 out of 10. There was a couple moments of dialogue that seemed a little out of place or a little extra, but those moments were extremely short-lived. This movie had excellent visuals that used lighting and sound very effectively. It had great development of its main protagonist, and it found the sweet spot between a creature horror movie and having some sort of subtone having to do with pain and trauma. I've heard that the reviews are pretty mixed about this movie, but for me, this is one of my favorite creature horror movies that I've seen. So with all that in mind, if you enjoy a good horror movie, and maybe like me aren't really into all that demonic stuff, I think The Boogeyman is a great option for you to go see in theaters. Thank you so much for watching. If you've seen The Boogeyman, please let me know what you thought about it in the comments below. As always, I appreciate your love and support, and I'll catch you guys and gals in the next one.